The wind that night had a particular chill to it. The sound of it seeping through the cracks of the old window frame was enough to send a shiver down my spine. I run a small diner, and after a long, exhausting day, I had just managed to get my daughter, Lily, to sleep before falling into a deep slumber myself. My husband, Mike, was working the night shift at an auto parts factory on the outskirts of Cleveland, so it was just me and Lily in our modest duplex. The house was so quiet you could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall with unusual clarity. It must have been just after midnight. I was lost in sleep when I was startled awake by Lily's ragged breathing next to me. Thinking she was just tossing and turning, I gently patted her back. But as she let out a faint moan and her hand grasped mine, I felt my heart drop. It was as cold as ice. "Mommy, my tummy hurts. Mommy, it hurts so bad." Each word was a struggle, her voice hoarse and her half-open eyes filled with tears. I shot up, clutching my wildly beating heart, and shook her gently. "Lily, Lily, what's wrong? Talk to Mommy." She curled into a ball like a shrimp, clutching her stomach, and then began to scream in agony. "Mommy, it hurts too much. I can't breathe. Mommy, help me." In that moment, it felt as if someone was strangling me. My breath caught in my throat, and a cold dread washed over me. Without a second thought, I threw a light jacket over her, scooped her up, and burst out the front door. The empty night street was lit only by the faint, flickering glow of a single streetlight. I ran, frantically calling for Frank, a delivery driver who lived in the same duplex complex. Thankfully, he was still awake. "Frank, please. You have to take Lily to the hospital. Her stomach hurts, and she can't breathe." Frank flipped on his porch light and came rushing out, throwing open the door to his pickup truck. When he saw Lily, pale, her lips trembling, and sweat pouring down her face, he was horrified. "Oh my God. Get in, quick." I held Lily tight and climbed into the passenger seat, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold on. The cold night air whipped against my face as the truck roared to life, leaving Lily's faint gasps behind us as we sped away. At some point, my daughter's eyes were barely open as she struggled for each breath. I held her hand and sobbed. "Lily, don't be scared. Mommy's right here. You have to stay with me. Don't you leave Mommy, you hear me?" The moment we screeched to a halt in front of the General Hospital's ER, I barely managed a thank you to Frank before I carried my daughter and ran inside. A doctor in his mid-40s, looking exhausted from the night shift with dark circles under his eyes, quickly took her from my arms. "What happened to her? Does she have any pre-existing conditions?" "No, she's perfectly healthy. She ate her dinner just fine. But then in the middle of the night, she started screaming about her stomach and couldn't breathe. Please, doctor, you have to save my baby." I spoke in a stammer, barely able to stand on my trembling legs. The doctor signaled to the nurses, who swiftly connected an IV drip, drew blood for urgent tests, and began monitoring her heart rate. I stood beside the bed, helplessly watching as needles pierced my child's small body and machines were hooked up to her. Lily lay motionless, her small face contorted in pain. Wiping away my tears, I trembled uncontrollably. I had never felt so powerless in my life. A nurse approached me and asked gently, "Did she eat anything unusual? Is there any possibility she could have gotten into some medication at home?" I shook my head like a madwoman. "No, I keep all the medicine locked up. She ate what she always eats. I made her meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and before bed, she had a glass of milk. That's it, that's all she had." The nurses exchanged worried glances, but at that moment, all I could focus on was the faint sound of my daughter's breathing. About 20 minutes later, the doctor returned with the lab results. He took off his glasses, rubbed his forehead, and looked at me. His eyes were impossibly heavy. My hands clenched the hem of my shirt, bracing for the worst. "Sarah," the doctor's voice was low. "We detected adult-strength antidepressants in your daughter's blood. A very large amount." I froze on the spot, a high-pitched ringing filling my ears. I must have misheard him. "What? What kind of medicine did you say?" "We don't have anything like that in our house. I've never even seen a pill like that in my life." The doctor didn't answer right away. He placed the results on the desk and looked up at me. His gaze was so serious that my hands began to shake on their own. This wasn't a one-time accident. Judging by the concentration in her blood, She has been ingesting this drug repeatedly over several days. This means it wasn't an accident. My heart plummeted. I had to grab the wall to keep from collapsing. My lips trembled, and I couldn't form words. Who would do this to my daughter? Oh, God. The doctor paused, as if to control his own emotions, before adding a sentence that chilled me to the bone. Sarah, in cases like this, I strongly advise you to file a police report immediately. This is not a normal situation. I stared at him blankly, then looked at Lily, lying there dependent on an oxygen mask. The world began to spin. A police report? That's right. A drug that's hard for even adults to handle. Someone had been deliberately feeding it to my child, not just once, but multiple times. I nearly collapsed to the floor. Burying my face in my hands, tears streamed down like a flood. Images of Lily over the past few days flashed through my mind. She had been listless, barely eating. She'd occasionally gag, and had trouble sleeping, complaining of headaches. I had dismissed it all as a seasonal bug. Why hadn't I been more attentive? Why hadn't I brought her to the hospital sooner? Then, a single question pierced through my grief, sending an icy chill down my spine. Who did this? Who would want to harm a 6-year-old child? The pain was so sharp, it felt like my chest was being crushed. The faces of people around us began to flash in my mind. The next-door neighbor, Carol, who often stopped by with treats. My sister-in-law, Jessica, who sometimes watched Lily. Even my mother-in-law, Eleanor, who had never been pleased that I'd given her a granddaughter instead of a grandson. But surely not. It couldn't be them, could it? Or was it someone else? My mind was a tangled mess. The doctor placed a hand on my shoulder. Right now, stabilizing your daughter is the priority. But you need to think carefully about everyone who had contact with her, everyone who might have given her food. I gripped the edge of the bed and forced myself to stand. Shards of suspicion began to form in my mind, and the fear in my heart ignited into a burning flame of rage. My body trembled with fear and anger. I looked at my daughter, and made a silent vow. Lily, don't worry. Mommy will find them. Whoever it is, Mommy will never, ever forgive them. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The sound of doctor's footsteps echoed in the hallway, and the cold fluorescent lights bleached everything white. My heart felt like it was on fire. There was only one thought in my mind. Someone put drugs in my child's food. And the culprit was someone very close to us. I stayed by my daughter's bedside. My eyes were swollen and stung, but I didn't dare close them. The IV dripped at a steady pace, and the heart monitor beeped rhythmically. Each sound was like a knife slicing through my heart. Lily's convulsions had stopped, but her face was as white as a sheet, her lips cracked and dry. Every time I looked at her, my heart felt like it was being torn to shreds. As I gently wiped the sweat from her brow with a warm, damp cloth, Lily's tiny fingers weakly curled around my hand. That small movement made a lump form in my throat. Around 3 a.m., my husband, Mike, rushed into the room, breathing heavily, looking like he'd come straight from his night shift. When he saw me and our daughter, he froze. Sarah, what's wrong with Lily? You sounded so frantic on the phone. I couldn't understand a word. I looked at my husband, so much to say, but my throat was choked with emotion. Minutes earlier, the doctor had warned me not to speak carelessly about the incident, as it could be a deliberate poisoning. I took Mike's hand, my whole body shaking. Someone's been putting drugs in Lily's food. Antidepressants. For adults. The doctor said it looks like it's been happening for days. Mike's eyes widened in disbelief. What? What kind of sick person would do that? We don't have enemies. I looked up at my husband. We stared at each other for a long moment, a wave of pain and confusion washing over us. Mike squeezed my hand tightly. I swear to you, Sarah, I won't let them get away with this. Whoever dared to touch my daughter? I nodded, but my voice was gone. We had to find the culprit. Who had been in contact with Lily? Who had given her food? As I tried to list the suspects, my throat tightened again. Me, my husband, his mother Eleanor, his sister Jessica, and a few neighbors who occasionally gave her cookies. Recently, our next-door neighbor Carol's daughter, Emily, had been playing with Lily, and Carol had given Lily some milk, saying it might help her appetite. I started to tremble with anxiety. Every name brought a wave of dread, but strangely, my mother-in-law's face was the clearest. Eleanor, who had always been disappointed that I had a daughter. When Lily was born, she had said coldly, "A girl is nice, I guess, but they just grow up and leave you. You'll really be happy when you have a son." I have never forgotten the shame I felt that day. But even so, her own granddaughter? Would she really try to poison her? The thought was so monstrous that I frantically shook my head. No, I can't jump to conclusions. I have to stay rational. Mike placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sarah, let's focus on protecting our daughter first. We can figure out who's to blame later. Don't be scared. I'm here." His words were a small comfort in the storm, but my heart was still racked with unease. I turned back to Lily. Her breathing was stable, but she looked so exhausted. Looking at her, a quiet rage began to smolder deep inside me. Who dared to do this to my daughter? At 4 a.m., the ER doors opened, and the doctor came in to check on her again. After examining Lily, he nodded. "She's stable for now. We need to monitor her for a few more days to make sure the drugs are flushed out of her system. But do not allow any strangers to visit. And when the police begin their investigation, you both need to cooperate fully." My heart sank. The police. It had really come to that. I looked at Mike, who gave a small, grim nod. I had lived a quiet life. I never imagined my family would be caught in the middle of something so horrific. Around 6 a.m., my mother-in-law, Eleanor, rushed into the hospital. The moment she entered the room, she demanded, "Where's Lily? The child is hospitalized overnight, and her own mother can't even make a single phone call." Her voice was urgent, but laced with accusation. I gripped the corner of the bed, trying to remain calm. "Mom," at the time, all I could think about was saving her. She couldn't breathe. Eleanor approached the bed and looked down at her granddaughter. Her eyes were red, but her tone was still irritated. "My goodness, what did the hospital say? Why is she so pale?" I glanced at Mike. He avoided my gaze and said quietly, "The doctors are still running tests, Mom. They're not sure yet." Eleanor sighed and muttered, "That's how kids are. They catch a chill at night or eat something bad, and they get sick. From now on, don't let her run around so much." Hearing that, my stomach turned. The doctor had warned me to be careful what I said, but listening to my mother-in-law, my heart started to pound. Was I being overly sensitive because of what happened, or did her words sound disturbingly casual? She added, "I gave her some of that pound cake from her aunt's yesterday. Maybe that upset her stomach." Mike and I both froze. Pound cake. His mother gave Lily pound cake. I hadn't seen any cake last night, and she had never mentioned it to me. When did she eat it? Who gave it to her? I looked at Mike, and his brow was furrowed. He was clearly thinking the same thing. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Mom, what pound cake?" "I didn't see any." Eleanor seemed slightly flustered and shrugged. "Oh, in the afternoon, when you were out grocery shopping. She asked for some, so I gave her a little piece." I felt my legs start to give way. A wave of suspicion swirled in my mind. But another voice inside me screamed, "Don't jump to conclusions. Are you crazy, accusing your own family?" I swallowed hard and looked my mother-in-law straight in the eye. "Mom, have you seen anyone touching Lily's things?" She looked up at me, her brow furrowed. "Touching her things? What kind of nonsense is that? This is our home. The child got sick. It was just bad luck. Don't say such reckless things." I bit my lip. The words reckless things stabbed me like a knife. I turned my head to hide my tears. My family had never felt so distant. My husband quickly stepped in to diffuse the tension. "Let's stop this and focus on Lily." Eleanor sat in a chair and began to wipe Lily's forehead with a cloth. I watched her hand on my daughter's brow. It was the same hand that held Lily when she was born, the same hand that spoon-fed her porridge. My mind was a chaotic mix of suspicion, fear, compassion, and anger. But the doctor's words echoed in my ears. Only a family member, or someone very close, could do this repeatedly over several days. My heart tightened. I placed my hand over my daughter's, holding it tight, as if to shield her from the entire world. "Whoever you are, Mommy will unmask you. I swear it." The sky outside was getting brighter, but a new darkness was just beginning to descend upon my heart. I sat there, my mind a tangled mess, watching my mother-in-law wipe my daughter's forehead. My heart leaped at every single one of Lily's breaths. The word pound cake echoed in my head, rhythmic and chilling, like the ticking of a clock. She had said it so casually. In the afternoon, when you were out grocery shopping, I had been gone for over an hour. A lot can happen in an hour. I didn't want to think the worst, but fear made the worst-case scenario feel more real than ever. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lily's kindergarten teacher, Miss Davis. Mrs. Miller. I heard Lily was hospitalized. Is she okay? My hands trembled as I typed a reply. She lost consciousness last night. We're in the ER. We still don't know the cause. A few seconds later, my phone rang. It was her. Her voice was filled with genuine concern. Oh my goodness. She seemed a little off at school yesterday, but I just thought it was the heat. She hasn't been eating well lately, and has been spacing out a lot. I was going to suggest you take her to a doctor, but I had no idea it was this serious. I gripped the phone tighter. Miss Davis continued. She's been complaining of stomachaches frequently. One time, she just burst into tears in the middle of class. But when I asked, she said she was just sleepy. Mrs. Miller, is it possible she might have accidentally taken some adult medication? Kids can be curious, you know. Her last words made my breath catch. Accidentally? If it were an accident, it would have been once. How could it happen over several days? I took a deep breath. Miss Davis, we don't have any medicine like that in our house. Not a single pill. The other end of the line was quiet for a moment before her voice lowered. In that case, you should take a close look at the people who care for her. That's all I can say. I closed my eyes. Her words were like a stone dropped into a deep well, sending ripples through my mind. The people who care for her. Besides me, there was my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law Jessica who visited occasionally, and our neighbor Carol, who sometimes brought over treats for Lily and her own daughter, Emily. A fragment of a memory flashed in my mind like lightning. 2 days ago, I was in the kitchen washing vegetables, when I heard Lily's voice from the living room. Aunt Jess, this round thing is sweet. I ran out to see Jessica smiling. Sarah, it's just a gummy vitamin. It's good for her. I remember saying, don't just give her anything. You know she has allergies. Jessica had just laughed. I know. I only gave her one. It's fine. I hadn't suspected anything then, but thinking back, a chill ran down my spine. I opened my eyes and found myself face to face with Jessica, who was just walking into the room. She was holding a bag of oranges. Sarah, how's Lily? Oh, the poor thing. Jessica's voice sounded genuinely worried, and her face was bare of makeup, her hair a mess. She looked like she had just thrown on a coat and rushed over. I didn't look at her face. I looked at the hand holding the bag of oranges. It was trembling slightly. Was she trembling with concern for her niece? Or with fear of being discovered? My husband stood up. You're here. Jessica nodded. Yeah, Mom called me, and I came right over. I couldn't sleep all night. I had this feeling something bad was going to happen. I stared at her. Was it a premonition? Or did she already know something was going to happen? I took a deep breath and asked, trying to keep my voice steady, Jess, have you given Lily anything to eat recently? She flinched, visibly. Her expression froze for a second before she regained her composure. I gave her a gummy vitamin the other day. Why? Is something wrong? I looked her straight in the eye. They found adult-strength antidepressants in my daughter's blood. The doctor said she's been taking it for several days, not just once. The room fell silent. My husband and mother-in-law turned to look at me at the same time. Jessica's face went white, as if she'd been slapped. What? Sarah, what are you talking about? Oh my God. My mother-in-law slammed her hand on the chair. Sarah, what are you implying? Are you saying Jessica tried to hurt her own niece? Jessica stammered, the veins on the back of her hands turning blue. I really don't know anything. You know how much I love Lily. Sarah, do you think I'm crazy? She burst into tears. My husband stepped forward, his voice firm. Sarah, don't accuse people without proof. I gave a bitter smile. I knew they would react this way. But I hadn't made an accusation. I had only asked a question. To see the reaction. And that reaction was enough to chill my heart. I turned to my husband. Do you think I want to suspect anyone? Look at my daughter lying there. Do you know how torn apart I feel? If we don't find the culprit soon, Lily could die. I have to ask. I have the right to ask. My voice cracked, like shattered glass. Lily's hand twitched slightly. I held my breath and pulled her closer. Jessica sobbed. So you're going to call the police? Fine. Call them. I have nothing to be afraid of. My mother-in-law bit her lip. Sarah, words once spoken cannot be taken back. A family that suspects each other is a family that's cursed. I looked up at her. I was no longer intimidated. My gaze was cold and resolute. I'm not saying who it is, but the culprit is someone who can get close to Lily, and I will find them, no matter what. Just then, the hospital room door opened, and the doctor entered with a hospital staff member holding a file. The doctor glanced around the room and said, "The police will be here this morning to conduct an investigation. I need the family to be prepared. Until then, do not allow too many people to have contact with the child, and absolutely no outside food is permitted." Eleanor and Jessica froze on the spot. My husband sighed and put his head in his hands. The doctor turned to me. "Sarah, when the police ask questions, just tell them what you know. Don't be afraid. Tell them everything." I nodded. My heart was pounding like thunder. The doctor placed a hand on my shoulder. "Whoever did this is very methodical. This was not a spontaneous act. You need to be strong." After he left and the door closed, the room was as silent as a tomb. Everyone was lost in their own thoughts, a mix of confusion, worry, anger, and fear in their eyes. No one spoke. I sat down and kissed my daughter's forehead. My heart was no longer trembling. It was burning with a single resolve: to protect my daughter and unmask the culprit, no matter the cost. My pain had turned to steel, and from that moment on, I began to watch everyone, missing nothing, not a single glance, a shift in tone, or even the blink of an eye. The culprit was very close, perhaps even right here, in this hospital room. The morning at the hospital was cold. Faint sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating Lily's pale face. She was deep in a medicated sleep. Her breathing was better, but still so fragile it seemed like it could stop at any moment. I kept my hand on her chest, monitoring every breath, every small movement. It felt as if looking away for even a second meant I could lose her forever. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law sat with faces as heavy as stone. My husband stood by the door, arms crossed, staring at the floor. His mind was clearly in turmoil. The silence was suffocating. Then, the door opened, and a police officer, in plain clothes, entered, followed by a hospital staffer, with a notepad. The officer, a man in his mid-40s, had sharp but not unkind eyes. He surveyed the room before his gaze settled on me. "Sarah Miller, I'm Detective Miller. I need to ask you a few questions." My mother-in-law and Jessica flinched. My husband took a step forward, then stopped, saying nothing. I nodded, my voice hoarse. "Yes, ask me anything." Detective Miller placed a file on the table and spoke in a calm but razor-sharp voice. "I've reviewed the lab results. The concentration of antidepressants in the child's system is significant and appears to have been administered over a long period. We need to determine exactly how she was exposed to the drug. I'll need your full cooperation. This incident may be related to an intentional act of harm against a child." Eleanor gasped. "Detective, you don't have to be so scary. Kids can accidentally take medicine, you know." The detective turned to her, his gaze cold. "An accident is a one-time event. This was repeated dosing over several days. This was not an accident." Eleanor fell silent, her lips trembling. But she didn't argue further. Jessica kept her head down, her hands clenched so tight, her knuckles were white. Detective Miller looked back at me. "Mrs. Miller, has your daughter eaten or drunk anything unusual recently? Was anyone besides you caring for her?" I swallowed hard, a lump in my throat. "She mostly eats my home-cooked meals. But in the last few days, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law have stopped by and fed her a few times. A neighbor occasionally gives her a cookie or some milk, but it's not frequent. And we don't have that kind of medicine in our house." The detective took notes quickly. "Does anyone in the family take antidepressants?" I shook my head. "No. My husband is healthy, and I don't take any medication." No one in our family suffers from depression or any mental illness. The detective turned to my husband. Mike stood up straight. That's correct. I don't take any medication. I work in a factory. I'm healthy. The detective's gaze shifted to Eleanor and Jessica, who both started. Do either of you take this type of medication? Eleanor's face flushed as she waved her hands dismissively. Of course not. Who in our family is sick enough to need drugs like that? Jessica vigorously shook her head. No, I don't even know what that medicine looks like. I watched Jessica. Just moments before, she had been trembling, but now she seemed unnaturally calm. Maybe my suspicion was making me paranoid, or maybe my mind was just hyper-aware, but I saw her eyes flicker with anxiety when the detective mentioned antidepressants. Was it fear? Or was she hiding something? Detective Miller continued. Has anyone been visiting your home frequently lately? Relatives, friends, or anyone who might have watched the child for you? I racked my brain. Our neighbor, Carol, sometimes gives her milk or cookies. Her daughter, Emily, comes over to play a lot. There's also a new neighbor, Heather, who moved in recently. She asked me to watch her kid once, and when she came to pick him up, she gave Lily a pastry, saying how cute she was. The memory sharpened like a razor's edge. A chill ran down my spine, as I said slowly. A woman named Heather recently moved in. She lives alone with her child. She gave Lily a pastry a couple of times, but surely not. Detective Miller nodded, took a note, and changed his tone. From now on, I want you to log every person who approaches the child. If anyone gives her anything, take a picture of it. Do not throw away any food or drink samples until they can be tested. I nodded fiercely. The detective glanced around at our family and spoke gravely. Let me be blunt. The perpetrator has a clear motive and is likely someone the child knows very well and does not fear. I need you to understand that this is not a minor incident. Eleanor wrung her hands and muttered, her eyes darting around. But who would do something so evil? The detective looked at her with an unreadable expression. Sometimes the motive isn't simple. It could be jealousy, personal revenge, a grudge against the family, or an unstable psychological state. The reasons can be varied. With that, the detective excused himself and left. The moment the door closed, Eleanor burst into tears. My God, our family has always been so quiet. How did this happen? Sarah, do you really think I did it? Are you suspecting me? Her voice was choked with sobs, but it sounded more defensive than hurt. I looked at her. My heart ached, but I couldn't afford to trust or defend anyone blindly. I'm not accusing anyone. But to protect Lily, we have to investigate. Please, Mom, try to understand. Jessica stood up, wiped her tears, and said with a sharp edge to her voice, if this tears our family apart, Lily will be the one who suffers. Sarah, don't get carried away. I looked at Jessica. For a moment, her gaze avoided mine. Mike put his hand on my shoulder. Sarah, you should get some rest. Your eyes are so red. I was exhausted. My hands were trembling, and my head was spinning, but I shook my head. No, I have to stay alert. My daughter almost died. If I'm not careful, she'll be given that drug again. I can't let my guard down for a single second. That night, the hospital lights dimmed one by one. I could hear the squeak of doctors' shoes, the rattle of medicine carts, and the murmur of voices from the next room. I sat pressed against Lily's bed, a now empty juice box from the afternoon of her admission sitting on the table. I had kept it, just as the detective advised. Just looking at it gave me chills. My mother-in-law and Jessica had gone home to change, leaving Mike with me. Around 10 p.m., I went to the small bathroom in the room to wash my face. The cold water helped clear my head a little. When I came out, I saw Mike at the foot of the bed, going through the pockets of Lily's coat. I frowned. What are you doing? Mike jumped, startled. Oh, just checking to see if there's anything unusual in her clothes. As I walked closer, my heart stopped. In his hand, wrapped in a tissue, was a small white pill. I couldn't breathe. What is that? My husband's face was as white as mine. I don't know. It was in Lily's coat pocket. Look. We stared at each other. In that moment, everything stood still. Slowly, I reached out a trembling hand. Give it to me. Mike placed the pill in my palm. As I looked at it, a coldness spread through my body, and my heart hammered against my ribs. My daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, was carrying a pill in her own pocket. Who? When? Why? A horrifying realization washed over me. The culprit wasn't just lacing her food. They were manipulating her directly. They had gotten close to my child, circling right under our noses. I looked at my husband, my voice a strangled whisper. Mike, from now on, we have to suspect everyone who touches our daughter. Even our own family. Mike didn't argue anymore. He slowly nodded. Just then, my phone screen lit up with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging. The more you dig, the more danger your daughter is in. The phone slipped from my hand. Mike quickly picked it up, read the message, and his face turned ashen. I could hear my own heart pounding in my chest. There was no longer any doubt. This wasn't a mistake. This was someone's intention, their plan, and they were watching me, and their target was my daughter. Every nerve in my body was stretched taut like a guitar string about to snap. I clenched my fists. My lips trembled, but my voice was ice cold. All right, so that's how you want to play? This mother will see this through to the end. The phone screen went dark, but the words were still burned into my mind. Stop digging. The more you dig, the more danger your daughter is in. My throat felt tight, and my body was cold, as if I'd been doused in ice water. The culprit knew what I was doing. They were watching us, and they were so confident that they sent a direct threat instead of hiding or being subtle. My husband looked at me, his face devoid of color. Sarah, this isn't a family issue anymore. This is a real crime. I didn't answer. I stood up, locked my phone, and held Lily tightly in my arms. Only when I felt her faint warmth could I finally breathe again. A 6-year-old child, caught in the middle of such a horrifying crime. I gently kissed her hair, careful not to hurt her. Lily, don't be scared. Mommy's here. But honestly, I was trembling with fear, too. I stayed awake all night. My husband dozed off in a chair but would jolt awake periodically. I had never seen him so tense. He was usually so easygoing. I knew he was afraid, too. Afraid of losing his daughter, of failing to protect his family. Around 5 a.m., I got up for a glass of water. As I held the cup, I heard a small noise from the small supply cabinet near the door. It wasn't footsteps, but the sound of rustling paper, as if someone was secretly handling something. I looked at my sleeping husband. It wasn't him. Very slowly, I approached the cabinet and opened the door. Inside were the things I'd brought. A sippy cup, wet wipes, and fever reducer. But tucked away on top of the wipes was a small, folded note. It was crisp and new. It hadn't been there last night. My heart pounded. I unfolded the note. Written in a shaky hand, with each letter pressed down hard, was a single sentence. Children need their medicine to be good. My scalp tingled, and I almost dropped the note. The culprit didn't think they were poisoning a child. They believed they were teaching her. I collapsed into a chair, my hands shaking uncontrollably. My husband woke with a start. What's that? I handed him the note. He read it and clenched his fist so tightly the paper crumpled. His eyes were bloodshot. I swear, Sarah, I'm going to find this bastard. I won't let them get away with touching my daughter. But just then, we heard a rustling sound from the hospital room door. I shot up and threw the door open. No one was there. The empty hallway was lit by a dim yellow light, and the only sound was the distant rattle of a cart. My husband asked, "Did you see someone?" I shook my head. In the morning, my mother-in-law and Jessica returned. My mother-in-law brought a thermos of soup. Jessica had yogurt and fruit. They looked exhausted but tried to act casual as they entered. Eleanor set down the thermos and asked in a trembling voice, "Was everything okay last night? Is Lily any better?" I didn't look at her. I opened the soup and smelled it. Not because I was suspicious, but because I had no choice but to be. My husband stood up and said in a low voice, "From now on, if you're going to give Lily any food, you need to tell us first. Don't give her anything without asking." My mother-in-law froze, then sighed. "Mike, are you suspecting your own mother too? I raised you, and now," her voice cracked like broken glass. Jessica put an arm around her mother's shoulder. "Mom, don't be upset. Mike and Sarah are just on edge because they're so worried about Lily." I turned to Jessica. Her words made a lump form in my throat. Not from emotion, but from the artificiality of her tone. Jessica said sweetly, I brought Lily's favorite yogurt. Sarah, I can feed it to her. I stood in front of the table, cutting her off. No one is feeding our daughter anything except me and her father. The air in the room froze. My mother-in-law turned away to wipe her eyes, and Jessica bit her lip. A flash of something offended pride, resentment, or perhaps guilt crossed her eyes. Jessica spoke slowly, suppressing her anger. Sarah, you're talking as if one of us hurt Lily. That's really hurtful. I stared at her. If you were me, what would you do to protect your child? She fell silent. Her gaze shifted to Lily, then quickly away. I said no more and returned to the bed to hold my daughter's hand. At 10 a.m., the doctor came in with a nurse holding a chart. Lily's condition has stabilized significantly. The drugs are flushing out of her system well, but we still need to observe her for a few more days. I let out a sigh of relief, but my joy was short-lived. The doctor continued. Did anyone enter this room last night? I froze. My heart skipped a beat. Doctor, how did you know? He nodded gravely. Hospital security cameras caught a figure lingering outside the door around 3 a.m. They didn't come in, but the cabinet inside your room was opened. Eleanor's jaw dropped, and Jessica covered her mouth. My husband asked urgently, could you see their face, doctor? It was dark and blurry, but it was a tall person with short hair, wearing a dark coat. It didn't look like another patient's family member. I blinked hard. Short hair, a dark coat. It wasn't my husband. He was asleep in the room. Jessica also had short hair. But before the doctor could even finish, she blurted out, I went home last night. No one had pointed at her. No one had said her name. But she had shouted it herself. The room fell silent. I stared at Jessica. Her face was pale, her lips were trembling, and the hand clenching her coat pocket was white. My husband frowned at her. Jess, who said it was you? Jessica stammered. No, I was scared. Scared of what? Of being suspected, or of being caught? I suppressed my racing thoughts. The doctor looked at us and said firmly, the hospital has notified the police, and we will be reviewing additional camera footage from the hallway. Family members should take turns staying with the child, and never leave her alone. I lowered my head and looked at my daughter. My eyes burned. I no longer believed in coincidence or accidents. This was a planned, deliberate attack, and the culprit could be hovering by my side every day. There were no screams, no accusations, no arguments. Just a fleeting glance, a trembling voice, an unnecessary comment, and a mysterious note. It wasn't a knife that could kill someone. It was the silence and persistence of a person with ill intent. I placed my hand on Lily's chest. A shiver ran down my spine. Someone was giving my daughter medicine to make her good. Someone believed they were right. And I realized that a criminal with a conviction is 10 times more dangerous than an ordinary villain. I clenched my fists. I took a deep breath, my eyes bloodshot. All right. Let the games begin, one by one. After the doctor left, a heavy silence fell over the room. Only the sound of the heart monitor and Lily's faint but steady breathing could be heard. Under the white fluorescent lights, everyone's face looked as if they were in shock. Jessica sat in a corner, head bowed, her hands clasped so tightly she was digging her nails into her skin. My mother-in-law had her hand on her chest, her lips moving as if in prayer. My husband stood by the door, sighing and rubbing his forehead. And I sat by my daughter's side, gently stroking her hair as if she might disappear if I let go. The sentence from the note echoed in my mind. Children need their medicine to be good. It sounded like the excuse of someone who believed they were doing a good thing, but it was madness, a sick obsession with controlling a child. The thought made my blood boil. I leaned close to my daughter's face and whispered, Lily, I promise you, Mommy will find them. I'll make sure no one ever touches you again. Around lunchtime, the hospital room door opened. I froze when I saw who it was. It was our next-door neighbor, Carol. Her hair was hastily tied back, and her face was pale as she entered with a fruit basket, words tumbling out of her mouth. Oh, Sarah. I nearly fainted when I heard Lily was in the hospital. What on earth happened? I heard she got so sick she collapsed in her sleep. Her words sounded concerned, but something was off. The phrase collapsed in her sleep was not only inappropriate but also too specific. Who starts a conversation like that? Carol set the fruit basket on the table and came over to me. My goodness, she looks so worn out. I hope it wasn't because of the pound cake I gave her the other day. Oh, what if it was? I'm so sorry. I was stunned. No one had mentioned pound cake, but Carol brought it up first. And right before a police investigation, I tried to remain calm. What pound cake, Carol? Carol blinked, hesitating for a moment before forcing an awkward laugh. Oh, I think I gave her a slice when Emily and I were playing with her. But it couldn't have been that, right? It must be just a cold or something. Jessica looked up and stared intently at Carol. My husband also turned, his eyes sharp. I continued, my voice cold and flat. Carol, who gave her the cake that day? Did you give it to her directly? Or did Lily take it herself? Carol's smile was strained. Oh, I gave it to her. How could she get it herself? My husband cut in. When did you give it to her? We have a security camera at our front door. I guess I'll have to check the footage later. Carol froze for a second, her lips trembling as she raised her voice. It was that afternoon when I came over to play. But I remembered clearly. Carol hadn't come over that day. Lily had been playing in the yard, and Carol had just exchanged a few words with her from outside the gate before leaving. I had seen everything because I was hanging laundry. I stared at Carol. Could you be a little more specific? I don't remember you coming into the house. Carol's face flushed slightly, and her eyes darted around. Oh, maybe I got the date wrong. With so many kids around, I must have gotten mixed up. Every one of Carol's expressions was like a needle pricking my brain. An innocent person doesn't get that flustered. They don't change their story, or say things that don't add up. Even my mother-in-law was starting to look at Carol suspiciously. Eleanor asked in a low voice, Carol, do you know that Lily might have taken the wrong medicine? Carol froze on the spot. Her eyes widened. Sarah told me. Oh, that's terrible. But it's not serious, right? It's just a little bit of adult medicine. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. How did Carol know it was adult medicine? I hadn't told her. Neither had my husband or the doctor. How did she know? I looked at her and asked, my voice as cold as stone, do you also know what kind of medicine it was? Carol opened her mouth, then closed it. The air in the room grew thick. Jessica looked from Carol to me, her lips trembling. Carol? Suddenly, Carol burst out laughing. It was a hollow, empty laugh. My goodness, why is everyone looking at me like that? I was just making a comment. You're scaring me, but her voice cracked, her hands shook, and a blue vein pulsed in her neck. She was clearly terrified. As I stood up, my husband stood up too, as if to stop me from lunging at her. Carol, I looked her straight in the eye. If you know something, tell me now, don't make things worse. Carol took a step back, then another. She gripped the handle of the fruit basket, as if it were a lifeline. She took a ragged breath, and then uttered a sentence that sent a chill down my spine. She just doesn't listen. She's so bratty. You have to teach them when they're young, or what happens when they get out of control? The room fell deathly silent. My husband shouted, teach her. By giving her drugs? Carol looked toward the door as if to flee. My mother-in-law clutched her chest. Carol, Lily is only 6 years old. Carol burst into tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of someone who had been caught but still believed they were right. Everyone praises my Emily for being so good. She listens, she's polite, she never talks back. But Lily is always whining and crying and throwing tantrums. She has no discipline. I couldn't listen anymore. I stepped forward, my voice low and cold. Who are you to teach my daughter? Carol gasped. I just gave her a little sedative to keep her quiet and make her listen. It's not a big deal. It's not like she was going to die. My mother-in-law screamed. Oh, dear God. Jessica covered her mouth and sobbed. My husband rushed forward and grabbed Carol. You put drugs in my daughter's food? Carol shrieked. No. I just put a few drops in to make her a good girl. I stumbled back, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. Mike, call the police. Now. Carol struggled, trying to run for the door, but my husband held her fast. She screamed. I did it for Lily's own good. If a child is misbehaving, you have to correct them. I stared at her as if she were a monster in human skin. Carol, the kind, smiling neighbor who always handed out treats to the kids, had tried to mold my daughter into a good girl in her own sick way. My head was spinning. I staggered back to the bed and hugged my sleeping daughter. Carol was still screaming hysterically. She cries too much. It's so loud. She's a bad influence on my daughter. Since no one was teaching her properly, I did it for you, I wept silently. It wasn't family. It wasn't jealousy. It was a sick individual who believed they were doing the right thing, and that was far more terrifying than hatred. Security guards, doctors, and nurses rushed in from the hallway. A few moments later, Carol was dragged away, still muttering, "She needs to be taught." I did nothing wrong. The door closed, leaving only the sound of my own heart hammering in my chest. I held my daughter tight, hot tears falling onto her forehead. No one gets to teach my daughter like that. No one. I looked at my husband. His eyes were no longer filled with fear, but with fire. A mother will not let anyone touch you, whether the villain is on the street or living right next door. But as I turned to the cabinet to get my phone, I saw something that made my blood run cold again. On the bottom of Lily's lunchbox, there were faint, smudged letters, as if someone had written something and then tried to erase it. The only letter I could make out was a single E. I froze. Carol's daughter's name was Emily. Emily and Lily were very close, and Emily often stayed at our house for long periods. I slowly turned to my husband, my voice cracking. "Mike, it's not over." His eyes widened. We looked at each other and realized the same thing at the same time. It wasn't just Carol. If Emily knew about this, or had been made to participate, if that sick ideology had been forced upon that little girl as well, this story was about to get much longer and much more horrifying. Carol was dragged away, but her screams, "I did it to make her good, I was teaching her for you," clawed at my mind like hooks. Teaching? With drugs? Driving a 6-year-old to the brink of death? I gripped Lily's hand until my knuckles turned white. Mike placed a hand on my shoulder, but I shook it off. Not out of anger at him, but because my own body was trembling like a survivor of a car crash. The name Emily and the letter E were now seared into my brain as brightly as headlights in the dark. Carol was sick, but what about Emily? Was she involved? Or was she another victim? But why was the letter E on my daughter's lunchbox? Who wrote it? And when? Was it a warning, or an attempt to frame someone else? I touched the faint indentations of the letter. My heart ached. "Sarah, don't overthink this," Mike said softly. I looked at him with bloodshot eyes. "Mike, that letter didn't appear by itself. I'm not letting a single clue go." Mike fell silent. He knew I wasn't the type to give up or let things go easily now. My mother-in-law used to say I was a pushover, but the moment someone touched my child, I became a lioness. That afternoon, the police returned to ask more questions. I told them everything: the note, the pill, the anonymous texts, and the letter E. They took notes and said they would question Carol immediately. My mother-in-law and Jessica sighed in relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. But for me, nothing felt lighter. Good and evil didn't end with catching one culprit. What mattered more was who stood behind them, who knew and remained silent. I went to the bathroom to wash my face. My reflection in the mirror was that of a stranger. Sunken eyes, messy hair, pale lips. I no longer looked like an ordinary diner owner. I looked like a cornered animal, ready to fight back. As I was drying my hands, I heard small footsteps in the hallway, followed by a child's voice. She said it was this room. I stepped out and saw Emily standing there. Carol was gone. Instead, Emily was with her grandmother, Carol's mother-in-law. She looked at me apologetically. "Sarah, I'm so sorry to bother you." The little one just wouldn't stop asking to see Lily. "She's been begging to come ever since she heard she was sick." Emily peeked into the room. Seeing Lily lying motionless, her eyes filled with tears. "Aunt Sarah, why is Lily like that? Is she sleeping?" I knelt down to her level and spoke softly. "Lily is very sick, sweetie. Her tummy hurt a lot. But she's going to be okay soon." Emily blinked, looked around the room, then tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "I told my mommy. I told her Lily was crying because she's scared of shots." I didn't do anything to Lily. I froze. My heart dropped. Mike turned, his expression hardening. I tried to keep my voice calm so as not to scare her. Emily, what are you talking about? Emily whispered. My mommy asked me if Lily was being a good girl. She asked if Lily cried a lot. Mommy said crying kids aren't good kids. And she asked if I wanted to help make Lily quiet and sleepy all the time. My chest tightened. Mike clenched his fist so hard I could hear his teeth grinding. I forced myself to stay calm and continued. Did you ever give Lily anything? Like candy? Or a little pill? Emily shook her head frantically, her clear eyes wide with fear. No, I didn't. Mommy gave me a bag of candy and said Lily would get mad if I didn't give it to her. But I was scared, so I just told Lily to eat it by herself. I said I couldn't give it to her. The little girl's voice trembled as tears rolled down her cheeks. Mommy said I was good and Lily was bad, but Lily is a good girl. At that moment, my heart broke. Emily wasn't an accomplice. She was a victim, being brainwashed by a sick ideology. Children believe what they're told. She was just scared and coerced. I pulled her into a hug and rubbed her back. It's okay, Emily. It's not your fault. Thank you so much for telling me the truth. You're a very brave girl. Emily buried her face in my shoulder and whispered, I don't want Lily to be sleepy all the time. It's boring to play by myself. I held her hand. It was warm, but my heart ached. Lily will play with you again soon. But she needs to rest for now. Her grandmother quickly pulled her back and said in a low voice, I am so sorry, Sarah. I always thought Carol was too hard on the kids sometimes. But I live with them, you see, so I couldn't say anything. But from now on, I won't let anyone lay a hand on Emily or Lily. I looked at her for a long time. She avoided my gaze. She wasn't evil, but she was weak. And weakness, sometimes, is more dangerous than evil. It provides the fertile ground for demons to grow. Emily took my hand. Aunt Sarah, can I bring Lily my teddy bear tomorrow? I fought back tears and managed a soft smile and a nod. She would love that. After they left, I stood there in a daze. My mind was a chaotic mix of anger, pity, hatred, and fear. Mike helped me into a chair. You're going to collapse if you keep this up. I looked at him, my voice hoarse. Mike, if what Emily said is true, Carol was using other kids to drug children she didn't approve of. My daughter was just one of them. Mike gripped my hand. But our daughter survived, Sarah. We still have a chance. We don't know about the other kids. His words cut me like a knife. Tears streamed down my face. What if other children had been harmed? What about the other kids Carol had contact with? If she hadn't been caught, would she have continued her twisted education? I wiped my tears and took a deep breath. Mike, call the police. Tell them what Emily said and ask them to test that bag of candy Carol gave her. Mike nodded and took out his phone. I returned to the bed and looked at my daughter. What was so bad about that innocent face? She was a normal child who sometimes cried, sometimes whined, and sometimes was stubborn. That's what it means to be a child. No one has the right to force a child to be good. I leaned over and whispered, my voice raw, you are my daughter. And I will teach you with love, not with drugs. No one can take away your laughter, your breath, your personality. No one can decide for me what good looks like for you. I stood up. I was exhausted, but I felt as solid as a rock. Mommy will protect you. From today on, I will show no mercy to anyone. My husband looked at me as if his quiet wife had transformed into someone else, a lioness ready to tear apart anyone who threatened her cub. Just then, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number, a single line of text. Carol was just an idiot. She wasn't the one who planned this. A chill ran through my body, and my hands went cold. Mike read the text and his eyes widened as if they would pop out of his head. Carol wasn't the mastermind? Then who is behind her? I clutched the phone, my chest tight. Mike, this isn't over. There's still someone else out there. The text message was like a cold wind sweeping down my spine. Carol was just an idiot. She wasn't the one who planned this. I froze. My hands trembled so much the screen went dark, and my palms felt like ice. Mike snatched the phone, read the message, and clenched his fist until the veins popped. Sarah. So who else? Who was behind Carol? I scanned the room. Every corner, every footstep in the hallway felt like a silent, cold pair of eyes watching us. I didn't answer my husband. A thought, as fast as lightning, and as dark as an abyss, flashed through my mind. But I didn't want to touch it yet. Not yet. I saved the text and turned off my phone. My voice dropped. Mike, don't tell anyone about this. Not even your family. Mike nodded, his eyes bloodshot. I wiped my tears and went to my daughter, taking her small hand. Lily was still in a deep sleep, her face noticeably thinner. I kissed her forehead. A sharp pain, like a thorn in my heart, made it hard to breathe. This child was almost turned into someone's obedient puppet. Someone tried to erase my daughter's cries, her personality, even her life, for the sake of 2 words. Be good. I could never forgive that. In the afternoon, the doctor came in and told us that while Lily was past the critical stage, she would need at least 3 more days of observation. I almost collapsed with relief. The pressure crushing my chest eased, and an exhausted sigh escaped my lips. But that relief didn't last more than a few minutes. Just as the doctor was leaving, we heard rushed footsteps in the hallway, and the door burst open. It was my mother-in-law, Eleanor. Her face was tense, her hair was a mess, and her clothes were wrinkled, as if she had rushed over from somewhere. Jessica followed behind her, her face grim, her lips sealed. Eleanor rushed to the bed and took Lily's hand. Lily, my sweet girl. I didn't intervene or speak. I just watched. Eleanor looked up at me, her voice choked with emotion. Sarah, I heard they arrested Carol. Is it true? Oh my God. How did this happen? I just gave a quiet nod. She wiped her tears and said with a shaky hand, to be honest, at first, I thought you were being too sensitive. But my God, what would have happened if you hadn't been paying attention? Her voice broke. For a brief moment, my heart softened. Just for a moment. Jessica stood pressed against the doorframe, her gaze fixed on the floor. She didn't look at me or Lily. She was unnaturally quiet. No crying, no speaking, no heavy breathing. She just stood there like a stone statue, trembling internally, trying desperately to hide it. I stared at her, and she immediately looked away. It was the second time she'd reacted that way. My husband frowned. What's wrong, Jess? You look exhausted. Jessica jumped, startled, and stammered. No, I'm just worried, scared. But her voice was unnaturally clipped. A forced, fearful tone. I felt it. My heart sank. It wasn't the fear of an innocent person. It was the fear of someone afraid of their secrets being exposed. Around 6 p.m., my mother-in-law and Jessica prepared to leave. Before they left, Eleanor turned and took my hand. Sarah, I see now how thoughtful you really are. If it wasn't for you, this family, I think we would have been destroyed. I managed a weak smile. You should go get some rest, Mom. I'll watch over her. As they headed for the door, I called out to them. Mom, just a minute. Eleanor and Jessica turned around. I stood up and said in a calm, cold voice, before Carol was arrested, I received a warning text. The person said Carol was just an idiot and that someone else was behind this. The air in the room froze. Eleanor's eyes widened, and she clutched her chest. What? What are you talking about? Jessica took half a step back, grabbing the doorframe. Her hand was visibly shaking. I stared directly at Jessica, without blinking. I'm not accusing anyone, but listen to me, both of you. This isn't over, and I will get to the bottom of it. A hairline crack of terror flashed across Jessica's eyes. I saw it clearly. She bit her lip and turned her head quickly. I have to go. She spoke too fast and then vanished. Eleanor started to follow her, then looked back at me, her eyes filled with confusion. Sarah, don't push people too hard. We need to handle this carefully. I smiled faintly. Don't worry, Mom. I'm not pushing anyone. I'm just not forgiving the person who hurt my child. Eleanor let out a ragged breath and turned away without another word. After the door closed, Mike put his hand on my shoulder. You scared Jess. I looked at him, my voice as hard as steel. I wasn't trying to scare her. I was just telling the truth. Mike fell silent. I returned to the bed and watched my sleeping daughter. The dim yellow light softly illuminated her face. Mike, if there is someone else, they won't be as easy to expose as Carol. This person knows how to hide, how to control, and how to twist the concepts of right and wrong. Mike took a deep breath. Who, Sarah? Who are you thinking of? I clenched my fist. My heart was pounding, and my mouth was dry. I had tried not to think it, but as each layer was peeled back, a face I didn't want to name, a person I believed would never do such a thing, came to mind. The person who had held her, put her to sleep, wiped her brow when she had a fever. I swallowed hard, my voice cracking. Mike, if the mastermind isn't Carol, then besides us, who had the most access to Lily? Mike looked at me as if he'd been struck by lightning. His eyes widened, a flicker of horror and denial crossing his face before it crumbled. Sarah, you don't mean... I bit my lip. My voice was low, but each word was a razor blade. Mike, what if this person believes they were doing the right thing? What if this is the person who always said, children need to be raised with a firm hand? A crying child is a bad child. Parents these days are too soft. My husband took a step back, his face ashen. He knew exactly who I was talking about. I could hear my own heart pounding. You're suspecting your own mother. The air in the room shattered. My husband closed his eyes, his hands falling limply to his sides, his lips trembling. Sarah, you're crazy. My mom? Why would my mom do something like that? I didn't scream or cry. My voice was terrifyingly calm. I didn't say she did it. I said I suspect her, and I have my reasons. Her words, her way of teaching, the way she looks at a crying child. I remember every single word. My husband shook his head, as if trying to banish a demon from his mind. No, it can't be. I stood up and went to him, holding him, not to let him collapse, but to prevent the truth from being hidden. I spoke slowly into his ear. Mike, I know you love your mother, but you love your daughter more, don't you? He didn't answer, but his shoulders were shaking. I held him tight and looked past him, towards the door. Carol was just a dumb weapon, swung wildly, but who aimed that weapon? Who planted the idea that a child must be quiet to be good? Who drilled that into someone else's head? My husband whispered like a sleepwalker. Mom used to say things like that to Carol all the time at home. That kids need to be toughened up. That Lily was a difficult child to raise. My lips tightened. That's right. I remember. Too. He pulled away and looked at me, his eyes completely lifeless. Sarah, if you're right, then my mother just made Carol crazier. She didn't actually give her the drugs. I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. And maybe your mother also gave Lily a smaller dose indirectly, to test her reaction. My husband staggered back and collapsed into a chair. He buried his head in his hands and shook it violently. No, oh God, no. I turned back to my daughter. My heart felt like it was being torn to shreds. Mike, we're not making accusations. We're investigating. And this time, I'm not trusting anyone, not even family. He looked up, his eyes filled with a despair greater than my own. Sarah, please, I hope you're wrong. I looked at him with eyes as cold as iron. So do I. But if it's true, we have to fight the person closest to us. Outside, a chilling wind blew. Inside the hospital room, all that remained was the sound of a mother's and a father's hearts beginning to break. And out there, in the darkness, someone was watching, waiting to see if we would dare to take the next step. The night descended on the hospital like a thick, suffocating blanket. Under the pale fluorescent lights, my husband and I were like two shadows, sitting motionless beside our child's bed. No one spoke. The words "you're suspecting your mother" still hung sharp in the air. Mike pressed his temples and spoke in a hoarse voice, a mix of horror and pain. Sarah, my mom isn't an evil person. She's strict and difficult, sure, but she loves her granddaughter. I grew up with her. I know. I didn't interrupt him. He needed to talk, to cling to his memories to keep from falling apart. She used to hit me when I was a kid, but it was because she wanted me to be better. We were poor, so she told me not to cry. I wasn't even allowed to say ouch when I fell, but that's all in the past. His voice trembled. My mom, she would never tell someone to put drugs in her own granddaughter's mouth. I watched him for a long time before speaking in a soft but sharp voice. Mike, the easiest thing in the world to make someone do isn't evil. It's to make them blindly believe they are right. He looked at me with the terrified eyes of a man standing on a cliff's edge. You mean? You think Mom thought she was doing it for Lily's own good? I sighed, a sigh heavier than any sob. No one in this world thinks they're the bad guy. Carol didn't think she was evil, and if someone planted the seed, the idea that a crying child is bad, that they must be disciplined from a young age to be good, that person was your mother. My husband bowed his head, his shoulders shaking violently. Sarah, you're killing me. I placed my hand on his. It wasn't for comfort, it was a declaration. We're looking for the truth, not trying to kill anyone. If your mother is innocent, she'll be cleared. If she's done wrong, she has to face it. He gripped my hand like a drowning man grabbing a rope. I'm scared. I'm scared, you're right. I bit my lip. So am I. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lily's teacher, Miss Davis. Mrs. Miller, would it be okay if I stopped by to visit Lily? I replied, yes, Miss Davis. Please do. Just a heads up, no outside food is allowed. 15 minutes later, she walked in, her face etched with worry. She saw Lily, lying there like a sleeping angel, and her eyes reddened. I'm so sorry. If I had been more observant, I would have told you to take her to a doctor sooner. I just thought she was stressed from school. I didn't beat around the bush. Miss Davis, has Carol been coming to the school often lately? Did she ever talk to you about Lily? The teacher seemed a little surprised. Yes, she did. I ran into her a few times when she came to pick up Emily. Once, she mentioned how kids these days have no discipline and are hard to raise, that parents are too soft on them. My heart tightened. What about my mother-in-law? Did she ever say anything to you? Miss Davis looked slightly uncomfortable. Ah, yes. One time, she came to pick up Lily for you. I remember her saying that girls are difficult to raise. That because they cry and whine a lot. They'll walk all over you, if you're not strict. My husband closed his eyes. I saw his fists tremble. I felt like I was carving out my own heart as I asked slowly, Miss Davis, did you ever see Carol and my mother-in-law talking together while waiting for the kids? She nodded decisively. Yes, they spoke a few times. Once, they talked for over 30 minutes in front of the school playground. I overheard parts of it, about raising children, about how to stop them from crying. They were saying that a stubborn child needs to be corrected from a young age. Do you know what it feels like for your heart to plummet to the floor? That was it. My husband opened his eyes and looked at me. His gaze was like ash. Sarah. Then, my throat closed up. Mike, I'm not saying your mother did it herself, but she influenced Carol. She planted the idea, and she fanned the flames. My husband buried his head in his hands. Oh God. Mom wouldn't have known. She would have had no idea it would come to this. She was just trying to teach her the old-fashioned way. She didn't mean any harm. I spoke in a small but piercing voice. The person who pushes someone off a cliff is just as guilty as the person who lands the blow. The air in the room became suffocating. Miss Davis looked at me not with judgment, but with sympathy. No one is perfect, Mrs. Miller. But what you're doing now is the right thing. You're protecting your child and breaking a chain of harmful thinking. Miss Davis stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. Lily is lucky to have a mother like you. When she's older, she'll understand all of this. I bowed my head. Just as she left and the door closed, my husband's phone rang. He looked at the screen, and his expression changed instantly. He showed me the phone. It was a text from his mother. Mike, Sarah is not in her right mind. Don't let her destroy this family. My chest tightened. It was a cold, painful blow. She hadn't even asked about her granddaughter. She was just worried I would ruin the family. My husband looked like he'd been hit with a hammer. His voice trembled. Sarah, she's just being defensive. She thinks you're trying to frame her. I gripped the phone and looked at him. That's right. Guilty people are always afraid of being dragged into the light. He breathed heavily. Sarah, don't say that. Please. I placed my hand on his. My voice was quiet, but as strong as steel. No one wants to believe their family did something wrong. But Mike, what if the person who gave Carol that idea, who planted that seed, was your mother? My husband shot up and punched the wall. Not out of anger at me, but at the truth. He shouted, I don't want to believe it. But what the teacher said, the look in Jessica's eyes, this text, it's all adding up. Sarah. I pulled him into a hug. For the first time since this ordeal began, he sobbed like a child. If it's true about my mom, that would be more painful than dying. I held him tight and whispered, I know your heart is breaking, but Mike, you love your daughter more. He buried his head in my shoulder. After a long while, he looked up. His eyes were red, but his gaze had changed. There was no more avoidance, no more denial. His voice was filled with resolve and pain. Sarah, if mom is really involved, I'll be the one to ask her. I nodded. Don't be rash. Let the police investigate. But we'll do our own investigation, for our daughter. He wiped his tears and gave a bitter smile. You know, what I'm most afraid of right now isn't whether she did it or not. It's whose side I'll have to take if she did. I looked him straight in the eye, unwavering. You have to take the side of what's right, our daughter's side. He closed his eyes, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. Right. Our daughter's side. We sat by Lily's bed again. I took my husband's hand. I never knew a man's hand could be so cold. From the hallway came the sounds of carts and announcements for doctors. Inside the room, the only sound that kept me alive was my daughter's small breath. And just when I thought things had quieted down, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. Carol just did what she was told. The person who taught her is waiting for you to come home. I shot to my feet. My heart felt like it was in freefall. Mike, they know we suspect them. They're taunting us. My husband rushed over and took my hand. His voice choked. Sarah, it's someone in our family. And I knew. From that moment on, all boundaries were gone. Filial piety, trust. Everything was shaken. We no longer hoped we were wrong. We had to fight back. Not out of hatred, but because my daughter was alive and deserved to live like a child. I looked at my husband. His hands were shaking, but he didn't let go of mine. Mike, we're going home tomorrow, he nodded. His eyes were red, but his gaze was as sharp as a blade. Tomorrow, we face the truth. The next morning, as the first rays of sun pierced the hospital window, I was ready. Not a peaceful readiness, but the readiness of someone standing before fire. Knowing the next step would be into the flames, but having to take it anyway. Lily was sleeping more peacefully, watching her breathe in and out. I felt my own heart mend just a little. My husband stood beside me. His shirt was wrinkled, and his eyes were hollow. Neither of us had slept, but no one complained. Mike put a hand on my shoulder. His voice trembled slightly but was clear. We're going home today to ask her directly. But Sarah, he looked deep into my eyes. Let me speak first. I need to look her in the face. I need to hear it from her own mouth. I nodded. I won't say a word. I'll just watch. He squeezed my hand. Just bear with me. I'll be right there with you. We left Lily with a nurse and told the doctor we'd be gone for a couple of hours. I leaned down and kissed my daughter. Don't worry, Lily. Mommy is going to protect you. No one will ever touch you again. Then I stood up, locked my softer emotions deep inside, and walked out the door. The drive home felt different today. Every street corner, every shadow of a tree, put me on edge. My husband drove slowly, like a man who had lost his way, and neither of us spoke. When the car pulled up to the front gate, we saw his mother, Eleanor, in the yard, watering her plants. The sun shone on her shoulders, a scene so peaceful it was painful. She looked up, and her face brightened. Mike, Sarah, what are you doing here so early? Is my little sweet pea doing any better? I looked at her. Her eyes were clear. Was she genuinely worried about her granddaughter? Or was it just the clear surface of a dark pond, hiding the murky bottom? My husband approached her, his voice unnaturally calm. Lily's doing okay, Mom. But we have something we need to ask you. Eleanor set down her watering can, wiped her hands on her apron, and nodded. Of course. Ask away. What is it? Mike took a deep breath and looked his mother straight in the eye. I had never seen him look so resolute in front of her. Mom, have you spoken to Carol lately about raising kids? About how to discipline them? For a split second, she tensed. I didn't miss it. Then she smiled gently, as if the question were a bit odd. Oh, yes. I ran into her when I was picking up the kids and we just talked about the old days. How kids these days whine so much. They need to be raised with a firmer hand. Why do you ask? My husband clenched his fists. What exactly did you say? Eleanor's brow furrowed. Mike? You sound like you're interrogating me. I don't remember exactly. Just things about teaching them manners and not letting them get into the habit of crying. He was breathing heavily. I knew he was fighting a battle inside himself. He continued, his voice hoarse. Mom, did you ever say that if a child is being stubborn and crying, you should find a way to make them quiet? She looked at him with an offended expression, as if she were the one being investigated. I might have said they need a good spanking. That's how I raised you, isn't it? I stood silently, not intervening. He stared at her. Mom, did you ever say to Carol that maybe you should give them some medicine to make them quiet down? The air froze. Eleanor's eyes widened, and she took a step back. Mike, what are you talking about? Am I crazy? Why would I say something like that about someone else's child? I watched her, trying to gauge if her angry expression was from shock or fear. My husband didn't raise his voice, but he pressed on coldly. Mom, did you or did you not say that? She bit her lip. I saw her hesitate for the first time. I might have said it as a joke. It didn't mean anything. The kids were crying so much. I said maybe they needed some sleeping medicine to quiet down. It was just a joke. My heart plummeted to the floor. My husband looked as if he'd been stabbed. Who did you say that to? Mom? She swallowed hard. Carol was there. But I didn't tell her to do anything. It was just a joke. Adults make jokes like that. I stepped forward and looked her straight in the eye. This time, I spoke. Mom, do you realize that because Carol took your joke seriously, I almost lost my daughter? Her face went white. Sarah, I had no idea she was that stupid. Carol isn't the stupid one. I cut her off. Carol just needed someone to tell her that what she was doing was right. The person who plants the seed is the most dangerous one. She trembled. Are you blaming all of this on me? I didn't scream or cry. I spoke in a calm voice, as if I were carving out a piece of my own flesh. I'm not saying you did it, but with your words, with your ideology, with your attitude that a child's cry is a bad thing, you contributed to this. Eleanor burst into tears and buried her head in her hands. Oh, God. I was just trying to teach her the old-fashioned way. I never wanted my granddaughter to die. You know how much I love her. Her voice was broken, but it was mixed with a desperate self-defense. My husband stood there like a man whose every sinew had been severed. I looked her straight in the eye. You loved her in the way you thought was right. But the wrong kind of love is more terrifying than hate. She sobbed. Are you saying I tried to kill my own granddaughter? My husband stepped forward. His voice was low and trembling. Mom, we're not trying to blame you. We just want you to understand. Times have changed. It's normal for a child to cry. It's not a crime. It's not a reason to use drugs or fear. She collapsed onto a stone bench, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know. I just thought she needed to be disciplined. I took a deep breath. I tried to hold it back, but the words burst out, raw and bleeding. Because of that word, discipline, I almost had to bury my daughter. The words struck her heart, like an arrow. She trembled, breaking out in a cold sweat. My husband knelt down. His voice was torn with pain. Mom, from now on, don't use that word. A child isn't a tree to be pruned. She's a person. I looked at Eleanor. A woman who had lived her entire life believing she was right was now watching that belief shatter before her eyes. I felt no joy, no satisfaction, just sadness. So much sadness. My husband turned to me. Sarah, let's go back to the hospital. Eleanor rushed forward and grabbed his sleeve. Mike, don't abandon me. I'm not an evil person. He gently removed her hand. No one is abandoning you, Mom. But you need to learn how to love all over again. I looked at her one last time. No one is forcing you to apologize. No one is telling you to admit your fault right now. But you need to know. A single word can save a child, or it can kill them. She cried, her eyes clouded with shock. I turned away, and my husband followed. As we reached the gate, she cried out in a broken voice. Sarah, I never tried to hurt my granddaughter. I'm more afraid of losing her than my own life. I stopped but didn't turn back. My voice was small, filled with a deep sadness. Then from today, learn to let her cry. Crying is proof that she's alive. I started walking. My husband gripped my hand so tightly it was as if he would fall off a cliff if he let go. We got in the car. As the door closed, he wept silently. I placed my hand on his chest. No one won today, Mike. But our daughter, is not going to lose. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the police. Carol stated she did not come up with the idea of using drugs herself. She claims someone told her they should use medicine to quiet a child. We will need the family's cooperation for further investigation. I took a deep breath. The war with the mastermind wasn't over. But today, a ray of light had pierced the darkness. The firmly closed gate felt like an old book, marking the day the color of our family changed forever. No one could ever hurt my child, in the name of love again. No one could hide behind the words, "I'm only doing this because I love you," or "I'm just trying to teach you a lesson." I looked at my husband. He held the steering wheel, his eyes wet, staring straight ahead. We were no longer running from the truth. We were heading straight for it. On the way back to the hospital, no one spoke. The car moved silently, but inside, our hearts were like a suppressed powder keg. It felt like a single spark could make everything explode. My husband drove slowly, and I rested my head against the window, watching the blurry cityscape pass by. My heart was no longer filled with fierce anger, but with a sticky sadness and a weary determination. The greatest pain wasn't discovering the villain. It was facing the fact that someone I had trusted implicitly might have contributed to my child's nightmare. But there was still one person who remained unclear. Jessica. She had been silent ever since Carol's arrest. She didn't take sides, didn't argue, didn't ask questions. She just avoided my gaze, like someone hiding something. My husband suddenly spoke. "Sarah, do you think Jess is involved too?" I looked ahead and said slowly, "Jessica isn't foolish like Carol. If she did something, she wouldn't have been so obvious. Jessica knows how to hide, how to be silent." My husband frowned. "But Jess adores Lily. I've seen her play with Lily with more patience than even her own mother." I replied, "The most dangerous person isn't someone who hates you, but someone who loves you in the wrong way. Carol's love was twisted, and your mother's love was trapped in the past. I can't figure out Jessica. That's what makes it scarier." He sighed heavily and closed his eyes for a moment, as if to compose himself. "I just hope Jessica has nothing to do with this. I don't think I can handle any more." I didn't answer, just gently squeezed his hand. I didn't need to say be strong. Holding his hand was enough. When we arrived at the hospital, I went up to the room first while my husband handled the visitor check-in. In the quiet room, Lily was still asleep. Her breathing was even, and her lips had a bit more color. I sighed in relief and leaned over to adjust her blanket. Just then, the door opened silently. It was Jessica. She stood there like a shadow, without knocking or calling out. She looked at me. Her eyes were red, but there were no tears, and while her face was exhausted, it wasn't the shattered look of an innocent person. I straightened up. "What are you doing here?" Jessica bit her lip. "I brought some fruit. And I'm sorry." My heart sank a little, but I didn't soften. "Sorry for what?" Jessica looked down, clutching the bag of fruit. "For avoiding you lately. I was afraid you would misunderstand." It was a vague apology. It wasn't specific. It wasn't about Lily. It wasn't about the drugs. I said, "Misunderstandings happen when actions are vague. You were vague, you were silent, and you avoided my eyes. You created the suspicion yourself." Jessica looked up, her eyes welling with tears. I didn't know what to say. Everything was just so scary, and I felt like I was being treated like a criminal even though I didn't do anything. I was confused. Her words sounded plausible, but her trembling wasn't that of an innocent person. It was the trembling of someone afraid of being found out. I looked Jessica straight in the eye. "Are you close with Carol?" Jessica flinched, then shook her head. "No, I've only seen her a few times when I picked up Lily." "Have you ever talked to her? About things like raising children?" Jessica took a clear step back. "I've heard her say a few things. Not a lot. I might have agreed once that kids should be quiet and not make a scene." Jessica bit her lip, her voice growing smaller. "I've thought that way sometimes, too. That's how I was raised." I nodded. "And who taught you to think that way?" Jessica didn't answer, but her gaze was directed toward the home we had just left, toward her mother. I felt the blood rush to my head. Just then, my husband walked in and was surprised to see her. "Jess? You're here?" She quickly bowed her head. "Yeah, Mike. I was just going to see Lily and then leave. My husband pulled up a chair. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp as he observed her. Jess, is there something you need to say? There's nothing to hide between us anymore. Jessica clutched the fruit bag, her face turning pale. I didn't do anything, Mike. I was just scared. I couldn't bear the thought of Mom being suspected. I asked immediately, if you truly believed your mother was innocent, why are you trembling so much? Jessica burst into tears. They flowed, but it was a quiet crying, without sobs or pleas of innocence. It was the crying of someone trying to hold something back. My husband sat down, his voice gentle. Jess, we're not blaming anyone without proof. But if you know what Mom did, or if you heard what she said, tell us now. That's how you can save her, not hurt her. Jessica looked up, her tear-filled eyes deep and insincere. Mike, Mom didn't do it. She's not that kind of person. I cut in. Are you sure? Or do you just want to believe that? Jessica uttered a sentence that sent a chill down my spine. I'm sure. Because if Mom did it, I would have known. And if that were true, I wouldn't be able to live with it. It was an evasive, painful, and false answer. My husband's shoulders slumped, and I clenched my fists. I was about to speak when Jessica's phone rang. She jumped as if electrocuted and frantically shoved it into her pocket. It was such a sudden, reflexive action. I stared at her. Jess, who's calling? Let me see. No, this is my private life. In that instant, my intuition exploded. Without thinking, I grabbed her wrist and snatched the phone before she could react. She tried to grab it back, but I had already unlocked it, with her facial recognition. She didn't even have time to cover the camera. The screen opened to the most recent text message. I saw it and my heart stopped. Don't let them drag you into this. If you keep your mouth shut, no one can blame you. The sender was Mom. Not my mom, my mother-in-law. Jessica wailed. Sarah, give it back. You have no right. I didn't do anything wrong. I couldn't hear her. I just stared at the text, my head spinning. My husband snatched the phone, read it, and his face turned ashen. He stumbled back as if he'd been hit with a hammer. No, Mom. Mom sent a text to Jessica telling her to hide something? Why would she tell her to keep her mouth shut? Jessica sobbed. It's not like that. Mom was just worried I would get stressed out. She was telling me not to worry. I looked at her. For the first time, my gaze turned truly cold. Jessica, you knew and you stayed silent. You looked away. Jessica didn't argue, just cried. The quiet sobs of the defeated. My husband's voice trembled. Jess, tell me. What did Mom say to you? Jessica buried her head in her hands and muttered. I just heard her say that she wouldn't let the family be torn apart by this. She said it's normal for kids to cry, and that adults just talk like that. She said she didn't do anything wrong. My husband's eyes turned red as he shouted. Then why did she tell you to keep your mouth shut? Jessica cried. Because she knew you would suspect her, Sarah. She was afraid you would drag the whole family into this. I didn't know whose side to take. Silence. That one word revealed the most terrible truth. She hadn't been ignorant, she had known and chosen silence. My husband leaned against the wall to keep from collapsing. I could hear him breathing like a man deprived of oxygen. I looked at Jessica. Not with anger or screams, but with a deep, hollowing sadness. You knew your mother planted those ideas in Carol's head. You heard it, you saw it, and you stayed silent. You watched my daughter waste away. And you were more afraid of this family breaking apart than of her dying. Jessica's voice was hoarse. I didn't know it would get this bad. I thought Carol was just talking. I never imagined she would actually do it. I was a coward. I slowly nodded. That's right. You're not evil. You were weak, and weakness can kill. My husband picked up the phone again, his hands shaking. Sarah, there's another message. I looked at the screen. It was an older text from his mother to Jessica. Don't say anything. Sarah is too sensitive and blows things out of proportion. Carol is an idiot and this is her fault. I won't let this family be torn apart by outsiders. My heart ached so much I thought I would be sick. She hadn't been ignorant. She had known, chosen silence, and condoned it. I didn't scream or collapse. I just stood there. And then, in a voice as sharp but thin as a razor blade, I said one thing. It's only one step from silence to complicity. And this family has already taken that step. My husband looked up, tears streaming down his face. Sarah. The final chapter of this story would be a real confrontation, with no more pretense. I took my husband's hand. This time, it wasn't for comfort, but to begin the fight. Tell your mother to come here tomorrow. In front of the police. There will be nowhere left to hide. Jessica sat on the floor, head in her hands, crying like a child. But I didn't look back as I walked out the door. The tears had stopped, and the fear was gone. In my heart, only one sentence remained. To protect my child, I will fight even my own blood. The next morning, the sky was overcast. The gray clouds obscured the sun, as if it knew that today, our family would have to face the hardest truth of all, the truth between us. I sat by Lily's bed. She was starting to come around, her still groggy eyes holding my hand tightly. Her clear eyes were completely unaware of the events that had nearly stolen her childhood. I stroked her hair, my voice trembling but firm. Lily, don't worry. Mommy's here. No one can ever hurt you again. My husband stood by the window. His back was straight, his shoulders tense. He hadn't cried last night. He had been silent, but in that silence, I knew he had made his decision. He would stand on his daughter's side. The hospital room door opened, and my mother-in-law walked in, followed by Jessica. No one spoke, no one bowed their heads, no one looked at each other. Each carried their own heavy burden. A few moments later, Detective Miller appeared. He was neither too strict nor too gentle, just calm, like a man who had seen countless families fall apart over unforeseen events. He spoke. We're going to have one last conversation today. I've completed all the external verifications. Now, I'd like the family to speak honestly with each other. Eleanor sat in a chair, her hands trembling in her lap. Jessica stood behind her as if hiding, her eyes red. My husband was beside me, and I sat with my hand on Lily's chest. Detective Miller looked at Eleanor. Ma'am, did you say in front of Carol that a child should be given medicine to be quieted down? Eleanor looked up. With tired eyes and a hoarse voice from a sleepless night, she answered, I did, but it was a joke. I was talking about the old-fashioned way of raising kids, and I misspoke. I meant no harm. The detective continued. Did you not think that Carol might take your words seriously? Eleanor's throat tightened, her eyes welling with tears. At first, I just thought she was talking. But when this all happened, I was so scared and confused. I didn't want to believe she would actually do something like that. Detective Miller turned to Jessica. Jessica, you received a text from your mother telling you not to say anything, correct? Jessica nodded. Her voice choked. Yes. Mom said she was worried Sarah would misunderstand, that the family would get chaotic, so she told me to keep my mouth shut. I was too weak. I didn't know what to do. Detective Miller nodded. Neither of you put the drugs in the child's mouth directly. But you both provided the words and the ideology that made a criminal feel that her actions were justified. It may not be a criminal offense, but you have wronged this child. Eleanor buried her face in her hands and burst into sobs. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Oh God, I just thought I was loving her. I never dreamed I would make someone else crazier. Her aged cries held no resentment or blame. It was the cry of someone who had realized that what they had believed their entire life was wrong, and was now facing the horrific consequences. I looked at her. I felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a deep ache in my heart. I spoke, my voice not loud, but with every word emphasized. Mom, I don't want you to kneel or beg. I just want you to understand. A child's cry is not a flaw. They cry because they're in pain, because they need their mother, because they're scared. Crying is what makes them human. They are not machines that take orders. She looked at me with bloodshot eyes. Sarah, I understand now. I was wrong. I'm so sorry, to you and to our granddaughter. For the first time, she apologized without excuses or anger. She was just afraid of losing her granddaughter, her beliefs, herself. My husband put a hand on his mother's shoulder. His voice was broken but clear. Mom, I love you, but from now on, the way we raise children has to change. Don't force the old ways on us. My daughter is still young. Don't force her to be an adult. She buried her face in her hands and kept nodding. I'll learn again. I'll change. Please, just don't hate me. My husband hugged his mother. Watching them, I felt my own heart lighten. Not because it was an easy forgiveness, but because there was genuine remorse. Jessica knelt by Lily's bed, crying silently. Sarah, I'm sorry. I didn't hurt Lily, but I was a coward. I was so scared the family would break apart that I stayed silent. I was wrong. I will never be silent again. I will stand on the right side. I closed my eyes for a moment, then placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder. Cowardice can be a lesson, too. You stood up this time. That's what matters. Jessica nodded and continued to cry. But she wasn't running away anymore. Detective Miller wrote a brief report and said, Carol will be punished according to the law. But the most important thing today wasn't finding the villain, but rediscovering the right way to love. He looked at Lily and said softly, children have the right to cry, the right to make mistakes, and the right to grow up in warmth, not fear. Then he looked at us, his gaze stern but kind. This case is closed. But do not let these old-fashioned parenting methods be repeated. Wounds are left, not just on the body, but on a child's soul. He bowed his head in a nod and left the room. No one spoke anymore. The door closed, and for the first time, the room was filled with a family that was truly looking in the same direction, protecting the child. I went back to the bed. Lily opened her eyes, looked at me, and whispered, Mommy, I'm thirsty. I burst out laughing. I laughed and cried at the same time. That simple phrase brought me back to earth, back to the one role I had to do best my whole life, being a mother. I helped her sit up. My husband, my mother-in-law, and Jessica all watched us with wet eyes. This wasn't a moment of victory or defeat. It was the moment an entire family became human again. I wiped her lips and said gently, Drink up, my sweet girl. When you're done, you can cry if you want, or laugh, or whine. You are you, and no one will ever tell you to be quiet again. She rested her head on my chest. I was scared. Mommy, don't go anywhere. I hugged her tight. I'm not going anywhere. Mommy will block everything for you. No one will ever make you feel like you have to be quiet to be loved again. Her small but strong arms wrapped around my neck. My husband watched us, tears streaming down his face. He placed his hand on her head. You can cry, you can laugh, you can run and fall down. Dad and Mom are here. Eleanor came closer and gently placed a hand on her granddaughter's back. Her voice was small but sincere. Lily, from now on, you just have to be you. Grandma will learn how to love you all over again. This old woman was foolish. I'll fix it now. I looked at her. There was no more thorny defensiveness, just the feeling that she, too, was a person, that everyone makes mistakes and sometimes has to start over. I said quietly, what's important is knowing how to stop and change. No one is born perfect. She nodded, her eyes red but clear. Thanks to you, I've come to my senses. No more words were needed. In that white hospital room, a child won the right to breathe as a child. 3 adults won the right to stand tall by breaking down. And I won the right to lay down the heavy burden in my heart. I leaned down and kissed my daughter's forehead. You are alive, and you are yourself. That's all that matters. Outside, the clouds parted, and sunlight poured through the window. Not a blinding glare, but a soft, warm light, like the embrace of a true family. All the conflict ended not with arguments, but with the hardest thing of all, facing one's own faults and changing. No one won, but Lily was saved. And that was enough.